Hi, and welcome to the New South Wales Government's Net Zero Transport team, featuring two Wattblock customers who've completed EV charging infrastructure upgrades with New South Wales Government EV charging grants. We're going to be looking at 6B Grandstand Pde Zetland, known as Aria, and 12 Wallaroy Crescent in Woollahra with 11 lots. So we'll start with 6B Grandstand Pde. We actually helped this building start their EV charging journey back in 2017, and it's now 2025. And it was as part of a City of Sydney Environmental Innovation Grant program. We did an EV survey of residents in 2017, and then we updated that survey again for Aria in 2022, and that helped the building work out the future demand for electric vehicle charging and help set their strategy. So in 2022, Wattblock did an EV charging feasibility study for Aria, and they're quite a large site. So there's quite a robust electrical infrastructure at this particular building. This is how we went about planning EV charging for 11 visitor car spaces and 119 resident car spaces. So the idea was to first do EV charging in a few visitor parking spots, 3 spots, and then later on move to a full EV charging backbone. So this is what the car park area looks like. They've got a 400 amps main supply. So initially, they did 3 shared charge points back in March of 2024, and they had 7 electric vehicles. And those 3 shared charge points helped them, get by until July 2025. Now they've increased the number of shared charge points to 5, and they've put 17 flat cables installed, and they now can support EV charging in all the private lot car spaces for 119 car spaces, as well as continuing to use the shared charge points. But they've also added 13 kilowatts of additional solar to take their solar feeding the common areas to 72 kilowatts, and that can provide solar-powered EV charging. And they've also added 3 more batteries to take their total batteries to 5 batteries or 66.5 kilowatt hours. So if there's some excess solar stored in the batteries, that solar power can actually be used for EV charging after sundown. Now let's have a look at 12 Wallaroy Crescent with their journey to EV charging. And their journey to EV charging actually started at a Woollahra Council and Rotary Club event at Rose Bay Golf Course. So Rotary, with sponsorship from Woollahra Council, set up 3 sessions on EV charging to help educate people in the local community. And this is how strata committee members from 12 Wallaroy Crescent first got started on EV charging. And Michelle Rose there was the host of one of those events. And she's from Woollahra Council's sustainability team. So this is the car park area at 12 Wallaroy Crescent. And this is how the first electric vehicle owner did level 1 charging off a power outlet that's in the basement car park area. And so that's a slow charging. The benefit that this small building of 11 lots had is all the individual apartment meters are right next to the car park area. And you can see this allows them to do an EV charging infrastructure, which connects directly onto their individual apartment meters. And that means they don't need like a billing and administration software system because all the electricity that goes through the level 2 charge points under this infrastructure actually comes off the private apartment meters. This diagram is courtesy of Car Chargers, who did the installation of this building. 12 Wallaroy Crescent also have 2 batteries, and they run the sump pumps during any storm power outages to make sure that their vehicles, that the car park doesn't flood and that those sump pumps can keep running. And hopefully 12 Wallaroy Crescent might move forward and install solar power on some of these rooftops. They've got 3 rooftop areas, and that could allow them in the future to do solar-powered EV charging. So just one other thing, we've got this Electrify Strata WhatsApp community. We've got over 200 members who are Strata electrification enthusiasts in it. Feel free to scan the QR code and join this WhatsApp group. And there are subgroups to discuss EV charging, solar batteries, heat pumps, etc. Now we'll jump over and you can have a look at the interview done by the New South Wales Government Net Zero team with Malcolm from 12 Wallaroy Crescent and David from 6B Grandstand Parade.
Hello and welcome to our EV Ready Building session discussing planning and feasibility. This video aims to help anyone interested in preparing their building for EVs to understand the roles and responsibilities of the various stakeholders who will need to be involved. I'm joined by David Levine and Malcolm McConus, who have gone through this process in their own buildings, and by Ross Durango, an electrical engineer with specific EV experience. So David and Malcolm, if I could start with you, why did you decide to pursue this project?
We thought it was a value-added proposal for our building, which is a small building in Sydney's eastern suburbs of 11 apartments with 24 car parking spaces in a basement area. And it was a bit of a journey for us all. There are 3 EV users in the garage at the moment, but we expect that to expand over time. And so we thought, well, it's an interesting government subsidy. Let's investigate it and see how we go.
Right. David?
Well, I think we'd kind of been on a pretty long journey around energy efficiency and renewable energy. So the journey for us started about 10 years ago, where we had massive electricity bills and we decided to tackle those. So out of that formed a core of 3 or 4 people who were always interested to sort of push the envelope further. And we undertook many, many things, including installing solar systems, batteries, energy efficient lighting, fans, etc., etc. It became pretty obvious to us with the rise of EVs and in particular the amendments to the National Building Code that in order for our building to maintain and retain its value into the future, that we needed to consider it and needed to consider it really quite seriously.
Yeah, great. And Malcolm, how did the project originate in your building?
We originally had a process put together by the Woollahra Council that was an information evening. We went along to that, met a few people. One of the spokesmen was somebody, an independent consultant, and they were quite helpful in framing our thoughts about how to go about it first up. And then we just came across the advertising from the EV Ready program and read the material there and thought, well, this is a project we can do and it's relevant to our building, and so it went from there.
Great. So within any of these projects, there's a lot of people that are going to be involved. Who within the building was involved in the projects?
At our place, I got enthusiastic about it with the chairman of our body corporate as well, who lives in the building. And we had a chat and then started to circulate the idea with the body corporate committee and the rest of the residents. It's a fairly small group, as I mentioned, and it just grew from there. But I think I was probably the product champion or the concept champion in the building.
Yeah. David, how about in your building?
Well, I think we've got a slightly different profile to Malcolm. We've got 164 lots, which is 129 apartments, of which there are 119 parking spaces. So we had 1 EV already in the building, and we hadn't had any requests yet to install any EV spots. So we decided to form a subcommittee out of the committee of 9. 3 of us went onto the subcommittee, and we got involved in developing and exploring the different options available to us. We knew that there were going to be many in time to come, and we knew that the pressure would be on us, so we wanted to get ahead of the 8 ball in 2022 already.
So, with that in mind, how did you go about getting the opinions of the owners of the various lots in the building?
Well, I think at the time, the New South Wales government had provided a research template, a very simple Excel spreadsheet. We modified a little bit. We surveyed the owners. They came back pretty much fairly positive, and we got an idea of the intent to purchase and the time frame, and that sort of guided us a little bit. With a large number of apartments, you could do research like that and get something statistically relevant to say, okay, we expect to have 5 within 1 or 2 years, 10 within 2 to 3, etc., etc. And that really sort of drove us into the next stage of the project.
Yeah, that template was very helpful. We did the same thing too and used it as a basis for a survey, but it was a relatively short survey process. We only had one person when we started the project with an EV, and that's grown to 3 so far, but we would expect similar take-up over the next few years to get to half and progressively build out from there.
3 out of 11 is pretty high.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And how did the owners generally feel about the program and the project that you'd embarked on? What were the main concerns?
Well, from the outset, most of our owners that we had spoken to were pretty keen, and they knew that in time this was coming. They just didn't sort of see it as here and now. There was one committee member who was somewhat cynical and kept on circulating misinformation and disinformation, links on fires and all sorts of things, and crazy ideas. But in general, everybody was quite supportive. I mean, at one AGM, the first AGM where we proposed some activity, our first steps, this particular person cynically mentioned, he says, why don't we put a petrol bowser in the parking lot at the same time? Which drew a bit of laughter, of course. Yeah.
And how about in your building?
We had pretty good endorsement from day one. Everybody thought it was a good idea and didn't see too many downsides. We also had one resident who had some concerns about the fire issues that have been publicised in various areas, but we thought that was manageable. Did some research into it and found some good evidence-based material to share with that person. And they haven't got an EV yet, but I'm quite sure they may do in the future.
Right.
But they then said, well, look, we accept that. Our building is also a concrete basement structure, and it's got fire suppression and sensors throughout the building. So we were comfortable that if something did happen, we'd be able to have preventative measures. But also we did the research and found that, you know, the charge of failures weren't necessarily linked to cars. They were linked to a variety of other charging devices.
Ross, it's probably a good time to come to you. What do you see more generally as concerns or issues that arise when people go on to this kind of project?
So I think that question of information and disinformation comes up a lot. We've already touched on fire safety and perceptions around fire safety and the need for an evidence base. There's questions there around what do the residents of the particular building actually need? So not all buildings are the same. A different cohort of residents in one building versus another might have different requirements, and that'll inform the sort of solution that gets arrived at in the particular building. And then finally, questions around finances. So in some buildings, there might be a pool of money ready to allocate to a project of this nature, where in other buildings, residents might have more concerns about out-of-pocket costs and cost implications in sinking funds, special levies, and so forth. Those sorts of things need working through relatively early because they'll shape the kind of proposal a building will go for.
Yeah. And getting that group together to support it is obviously a big part of it. So how did you go about that in your buildings, getting other people on board?
We had a meeting and I did a short paper, 3 or 4 pages, to actually outline the program, what it would involve, what the estimated costs may be, and what were the pitfalls. And that was well received. We had a broad discussion, 45 minutes, and unanimous resolution to proceed. That was at the first stage.
And David, how about in your building?
Yeah, with a committee of 9, I felt it was really important to get the committee on board, or at least the vast majority of the committee, which we were able to do, and involve them along the way in every single step, outlining the benefits of doing it, avoiding the pressure which was inevitably going to come from EV owners, and of course the negatives of not doing it for the longer term. And everybody sort of really started to come on board and wanted to be part of the subcommittee and wanted to get involved pretty early, actually.
Great. So how did you go about addressing those concerns around fire? Because that's a thing we hear often.
Well, I think Malcolm touched on it earlier, getting information, facts, fact-based evidence around that. And we also contacted, through our strata manager, we contacted the fire chief of New South Wales. They sent somebody out, they gave us some information and some guidelines as to what to look for, but they weren't overly concerned. Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add to that on the fire side of things?
Yeah, only to say that there is information out there and available from various industry peak bodies that can assist someone trying to chart their way through this one. Organisations like Owners Corporation Network, Electric Vehicle Council, EV Fire Safe have materials like this on public-facing websites that can be used. The other part probably worth noting is that insurance plays a part here, as well as the view of the fire services. So it's prudent, if you're changing the nature of what's going on in your building, to talk to your insurer. Insurance is a competitive game. If the insurer is not inclined to support the chosen direction of the Owners Corporation, then the Owners Corporation can call a broker and seek alternative arrangements.
Right.
That's a very good point. We did talk to our insurer as well through our body corporate manager, and they said no change. As long as it's done by qualified contractors with a plan, and that's submitted as the evidence after the event.
For sure.
I echo those sentiments. It's exactly the same for us.
So once you've got the broad support of the residents and the owners within the building, how do you go about engaging a feasibility consultant? How did you guys do that?
We had utilised the services of energy assessment consultants in the past through, I think, a program that we'd done with the City of Sydney for our energy efficiency programs and solar, etc. So we contacted that person and they conducted it for us. Fortunately, they're one of the approved assessors, and they did an outstanding job for us, a really stellar job, and it became evidently clear the pathway that we really had to consider seriously.
Okay. And how about in your building, Malcolm?
Yeah, we didn't have a consultant, so we went to the EV Ready program and they allocated one to us. And we made a contribution to the cost of that, and they came out to the site, shared a lot of knowledge with us at that site visit, and then came back with a great report, 30 pages, about 2 weeks later. So from that, they talked about level 1 charging, level 2 charging, what we already had, what the infrastructure looked like in the control room, and what the layout for cabling would be for our basement building. And they gave an estimated range of what the budget might look like. It was a little undercooked, but that was fine. It gave us the platform to then take out for a quotation for the installation. So that was a very helpful document and a very important document to actually get a qualified professional in to give us a considered opinion on what was required for our building.
Okay. And what kind of things do we need to look at when we're looking at a feasibility assessment, Ross?
So the feasibility study will look at the physical infrastructure in the building, the electrical, what the size of the supply to the building is, the age of the main switchboard, if that's going to be touched or modified. The feasibility assessment will look at the car parking environment. Do residents have their own car parking spaces in which equipment will be installed, or is the equipment going to go into a shared space? The feasibility study is there to identify what a good path forward might look like that'll meet the needs of the residents.
Excellent. Okay. How long did the process take with the feasibility assessor?
From our point of view, about 2 to 3 weeks. The most valuable component of that was the debriefing to the committee, where the consultant gave us an hour of his time, and he really outlaid in an open discussion what we needed to be considering at the time. So I'd say overall about 4, 5, 6 weeks from woe to go. And that assessment document became the kind of Bible going forward, and it was the document that was used over and over and over again. And I think without it, we wouldn't have made as much progress as we have.
Yeah,
So it's the first thing to do, in my view, and it's a small investment.
Yes, very helpful. It was our template and our bedrock document as well, and we used the hour with the consultant as well, which is included in the very modest fee for the work, and that was really helpful. Got everybody on board, so we're all aligned. We knew what the scope of work was going to be. We knew roughly what the installation would look like, and he had done an appraisal, as you say, of the switchboard, the existing setup and modifications as necessary that would be required. In our case, there weren't many. So it was a sort of plug-and-play program to do the installation.
Ross, what are the options for charging within a strata building?
Sure. So when charging a vehicle of a car nature, you're not looking for the highest possible speed charging that you might see in a public charging environment or for things like electric trucks. In a strata environment, generally speaking, the car's going to be available in the location to charge for a period of several hours. What this means is that you can use level 1 charging, which is a specialised cable that plugs into a standard power outlet at one end and the car at the other end. These are normally at the level of 10 amps single phase, about the same kind of supply you'd see for a kettle or a toaster, and they'll do 100 to 150 kilometres of range top up overnight. So if someone's doing normal driving behaviour and plugging in a couple of times a week, that'll usually be adequate. Level 2 charging is a fixed installed piece of charging equipment, usually more powerful than a level 1 piece of charging equipment. With level 2 chargers, you can fully recharge any car on the market overnight. That'll be particularly applicable in cases where trickle charging or top-up charging is not quite adequate for the needs of the drivers, or where a more complex load management system is being used. For completeness, level 3 charging is DC. That's when you're charging cars faster. In bigger buildings, level 3 charging may be applicable as a shared asset. The idea there would be the driver who is in the building goes to the shared parking space, plugs into the high-speed charger, and then an hour later moves their car and makes room for somebody else. Different buildings will land on different combinations of these levels of charging.
Great. And on that idea of shared charging, where do visitors come into this?
So the shared car parking space in a building is usually denoted as a visitor's car parking space. This is an area of how is the building going to be used for the benefit of the people who live there. Some visitors' car parking space is often required because visitors come to the building and need a space to park. It's possible to convert some of that visitors' car parking spacing to shared EV charging for the residents of the building, or to put shared EV charging in the visitor's space on the understanding that sometimes residents will use a visitor's car parking bay. Again, this is a discussion internally for the building to work out through their committee process how they would like to use the common property in the building.
Great.
I might add to that. That's a good point. We have 3 visitor parking areas, and we allocated 1 to a charger for visitor use, and that is on the wall. And we use the visitor car parks for contractors, for guests, anybody who wants to come in. They need a fob access to get access to the garage, but once in there, they can bring their own cable, plug themselves in, and charge happily away.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the building's capacity, how do you determine what the building's capability is for charging?
Sure. So I'd say step 1 there is you hire an expert. You find someone who knows what they're doing and is able to professionally assess the situation. What that expert will be looking for is what is the size of the incoming electrical supply to the building, effectively the size of the pipe coming in, and they will also be looking for what is the maximum demand in the building at peak time on a hot summer afternoon when all the air conditioning equipment is being used at full tilt. What's the difference between the capacity and the usage? That information is how much room there is for EV charging at any time. They'll also be looking for, in the middle of the night, when the air conditioning equipment isn't in use and most people are sleeping, what does the usage look like there? The difference between the capacity of the building and the off-peak usage is the room for EV charging after hours. We'll talk a bit more about load management, I'm sure, as we go through, but this leads to the question of, should we have the EV charging happening any time at all, Or should we have the EV charging happening when the infrastructure in the building is better placed to support that activity?
I'm sure we'll get onto that. What are the main components of an EV charging system in a strata building?
Sure. So perhaps divides fairly easily into the physical stuff and then the smart comms control type stuff. At a physical level, you've got a network connection to the building. The poles and wires connect into the building to supply electricity. You've got a main switchboard. You've got cable that goes throughout the building to feed all the various loads. In the car park, you'll have some dedicated equipment that is shared for EV charging. Things like distribution boards, busways, equipment that is there to provide for EV charging, which is common property. You'll also have some dedicated equipment in people's car parking spaces, which is their equipment, usually part of their title, but can be common property as well, that is allocated for the specific use of charging a particular car in a place. And that endpoint on the wall, it might be a 10 amp power point, or it might be, as we were talking about before, a level 2 charger. That's the physical stuff. The computer stuff, the comm stuff, the smarts, there'll be a system in there usually for scheduling when the EV charging happens. That goes to the load management we were talking about before. There'll usually also be a system in there for making sure that the cost of the energy is fairly attributed to the drivers. If this equipment is installed as part of a common property electrical installation, it's not necessarily fair for everybody in the building to pay for the cost of electricity to one or two people's cars. So there'll often be a system in place to ensure that billing is done fairly. And then obviously the IT, the equipment that is needed to enable those more complex systems to run.
Okay. So what's a load management system and why is that necessary?
Sure. The concept of load management is an old one. We've had load management on electrical equipment in Australia since the 1950s in hot water services, right? Arranging for the demand of the electrical equipment to turn up at a time where it works for the rest of the system. We've had load management of air conditioning equipment in Queensland for 15 years. Energex and Ergon have a system in place where they can send out a signal, voluntary sign up for people to have their air conditioning turned down at times of peak network stress. In EV charging, load management is applicable because the future where people charge their cars off-peak and not at the same time as all the other loads in the energy system are running is a future where energy costs are lower for everybody. The system is under less stress, the assets that are there to deliver energy are used more efficiently. Within a building, load management is important because if you want to be able to charge all the EVs in the car park at the same time as running all the air conditioning in the apartments, you will need a bigger electrical supply and that will cost money. It's far more efficient to arrange matters so that when someone gets home from work and plugs in their car, charging is deferred on a hot afternoon until such time as the other big loads in the building aren't running, and they get to their next day with a full battery and everybody's happy. Load management can be achieved in a wide variety of ways at a technical level, but the principle is charging the car should happen at a time when other big loads aren't present.
And what impact does the building's existing electrical infrastructure have on the capabilities of EV charging?
Buildings come in a huge variety of shapes and sizes. There was a building I looked at in Sydney not so long ago which had a supply for a building of 20 dwellings less than twice the size of the supply to my house in Moonee Ponds in Melbourne. This was workable because the building was built at a time before air conditioning, when gas was used for heating, gas was used for cooking, gas was used for hot water. That electrical supply was adequate at the time, but it's not adequate for a future where every dwelling has an air conditioner or an induction cooktop and there's electric cars in the garage. If you're looking at an older building that is largely gas supplied, there will need to be some electrical upgrade work done in order to support a future where there's electric cars charging in all the car parking spaces. The nature of the building is going to inform things like what is the best strategy for a building to pursue and what will it cost to execute that strategy. And that's part of the reason that good practice is bring in an expert who can assist and provide the sort of consultation document we heard about before to provide a sound, professional path forward for the residents of the building to follow.
Great, thank you. Is there anything else a building should consider before deciding what the best approach is for them?
I think we touched on at the start the survey of residents. That's a really important step. making sure that the building has properly understood the needs, the desires, the outlook of the people who live in the building, so that they're working towards a future that will meet those needs. That survey is an important input to the professional consultant, because the professional consultant isn't just advising on, I have this switchboard and I have these car parking spaces. In an ideal world, that professional consultant might want to know 5 of the people who live in this building are Uber drivers. They need 300 kilometres of driving each day, please. Please make sure the system can support that. So yes, I'd come back to right at the start, make sure the needs of the people in the building are well understood, communicate it to the professional consultant, and then go from there.
Okay, thank you. What approach did your building take to EV charging in the end? What was the decision that you made?
We went for level 2, which is one shared charger for each resident, and all the residents have 2 car parks in our particular building. And that was, I think, the most cost-effective and reasonable measure. We didn't feel there was any need for level 3 charging at all in the building. You mentioned previously the point about who pays, which is an interesting point. Our cabling goes straight back to everybody's individual meter. And so there's no billing system in our building, which, as I mentioned, only has 11 apartments, because it's just an additional wire into the meter.
Slightly different scenario in yours. So what approach
Quite
did you
different,
take?
actually. What the survey gave us was really an indication of timing. So we arrived at the conclusion that probably the best step in the first instance would be to utilize some of the 11 visitor parkings for 3 shared chargers. So we installed 3 shared chargers, level 2, 3-phase, so pretty fast if needed, but not super fast like a level 3. And those were installed, and they addressed the first batch of needs that we had. Second phase was always going to be full EV readiness that each user can charge in their own bay. Unlike Malcolm's building, we just physically could not go meter to, owner's meter directly to the bay. So therefore, everything goes through common power. And we therefore needed a load management solution, but specifically a billing solution that would work. And the 2 solutions deliver that, albeit somewhat differently, but they do that. So shared charging to start, and then whole of EV readiness, building EV readiness later on.
Great, thank you.
And it served us well.
So you talked about phasing your approach to EV charging. What does it look like in the future for you?
Well, of course, Ross had touched on building capacity, and we kind of looked at that during the assessment, and it was really quite horrifying, the cost, if you have to upgrade your supply to the building. So we really had to think within the constraints and say, in the future, would we be able to achieve charging without having to invest so much more supply? Fortunately for us, we had embarked on all of these energy efficiency activities to give you some indication. Our load had dropped from the grid by just over 70% over the last 10 years. So we've done a whole lot of work to become a lot more efficient. The good news about that is that it freed up a lot of capacity. So in a building of 110 car parking spots, we can charge 15 EVs at the same time at 7 kilowatts, single phase, without having to throttle down the speed at any point in time. And we feel that that is adequate for now. What that looks like in 5 years' time, if we have to do something about the supply, then we'll have to do something about the supply.
Okay.
But we're fairly confident that we've equipped the building well into the future, at least in the medium, if not the long-term future.
I might comment to that as well, if I may. The nature of this challenge is that we don't have to eat the whole elephant all at once. It's not like there's a magic wand going to be waved that's instantly going to convert all of the petrol and diesel cars over to electric. That's a transition that's going to take decades. And so if there's an apartment complex that today is asking the question, how do we serve the first 10 or 11 or 12? How do we serve the first 3 or 4? They don't need to race straight to the solution of electrify the entire car park. They can start on a scaled and modular approach that says, today, this year, we're going to serve the first 5 or 10. And then in 3 or 4 years' time, per our survey, we expect to have 10 or 20 we need to serve. We'll circle back at that point and execute another phase of the plan, or we will commit to reviewing the plan at that time. It's not necessary to solve the whole problem today.
So we've wired the building in the basement with switches and data cables to every double pair of parking places. And our plan is exactly that. We'll just sequentially roll them out. So the program only installed a visitor's charger and 2 chargers for residents, but they've got all the cabling, all the ducting, all set, ready to go. We've got plenty of power in the building by the looks of the work we've done to figure out maximum load and current load. And we've got 4 apartments on single phase, 7 apartments on 3 phase. And so we think that's manageable for expectations at the moment. We'll see how it goes.
Great. That's wonderful. Thanks very much for your contributions. Thanks for your time.
No worries at all. Thank you.